Hey everyone, it's been a long time since you've seen me in this setting, but here I am. We're back, and so as we've always done, I want to start off with a prayer today. So if you would just join me. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you for this opportunity to recommence what I had started, and even though I'd lost my previous Instagram account, got a little bit demotivated. I know that if I stick to the course, that results will arrive and that you will be lifted even higher. I thank you for everyone that's going to join us today. I pray that they'll be blessed by this video, that you'll reveal yourselves to anyone, if they don't already follow you, and that we're coming into the last days. I just pray that that you will use me as a servant to bring as many people towards you as possible. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, I pray, amen. All right, guys. So today we're going to be reacting to my Premier League predictions from before the season. And so if you guys want to check out that video, you can find it on my YouTube and my audio or not my audio, what am I talking about? My YouTube or my Substack rather. Still up there, and yeah. So starting off at 20th, I predicted Leeds. I had said that I didn't watch any of the championship, and that lately it's been 3 up, 3 down when you look at last season from relegation and promotion, and that I've heard good things about Anton Stack, although I haven't watched him. This season I got to watch a little bit of Anton Stack, and I was pretty impressed with what I saw. Definitely is a great player, as the people were saying. I said Longstaff could also be decent, but it's not an exciting signing. I don't really think he had a tremendous season, Longstaff, but Leeds did actually do a little bit better than I had expected. Um, I think they just have, I think Fark, I think is their manager, and a very aggressive style. They're very hard to play against. I just remember, I think they beat City, and that was a thrilling game, or they drew to City 3-3, something like that. Very thrilling game, very hard team to play against, sticking to the Leeds identity under Bielsa of just being, working really, really hard. They have some quality players like Tanaka, Brendan Aronson, who will chip in with the goals. But yeah, ultimately they finished in 14th. So a lot better than I thought. They actually did stay up, and I predicted them to, you know, get relegated. But of course, that was not an informed, um, not an informed prediction necessarily, because again, I hadn't watched the championship. But on to next, I predicted Burnley to finish 19th. They in fact did finish 19th. So I guess we did a little something there. Um, I said that again. I hadn't watched much of them, but I knew Walker was going to be a good signing, and I said with Tuanzebe, I think they'll keep the defense solid enough. I think Burnley definitely had a very solid defense. I think they were a team where you wouldn't lose to them, but they could definitely pull out a draw. They were always going to be defensively very solid. Pretty sure they played essentially five at the back a lot of the season. And ultimately they still got relegated, which is a bit of a shame for them. But you know, I guess that's that. I had also said that Dubravka will be decent, and Briggs is talented if he can stay healthy. No, Broha. I don't think Broha stayed very healthy this season, to be honest. Did not see too much of him, but I think at the same time, he just kind of lost his place. I'm forgetting the name of the striker right now. It's not really coming to mind, but I know they had a striker who had played pretty well this season, who was ahead of Broha for a lot of it. yeah. On to 18th. This is probably one of my worst. There's a couple pretty bad ones, but on to 18th. I predicted Brentford to finish 18th to get relegated. It was just, after losing Frank, I thought Frank, was a great manager. I mean, I thought he was a great manager. He had done well for Brentford over the past seasons. It seemed as though they had overachieved. You lose Mbemo, your best player, as well, who had a great season, who scored 20 goals last season to my club, Manchester United. We picked him up. And so I thought, you lose your manager, you lose your best player. They also lost Christian Norgard, their captain, to Arsenal. I thought it's going to be difficult to stay up. But Brentford proved that they are just an elite organization. I think there's certain clubs like Brentford where you know, you just there's certain clubs like Brentford where it doesn't necessarily matter, who the manager is. Even though let me give Keith Andrews you know, a huge salute. He did very, very well for Brentford this season. They're almost finished in the European places, finished ninth, just outside of the European places. And that's much better than I think anyone would have predicted that they would have done this season. So I think just like you see with Brighton, you see with Bournemouth to some extent, there are some organizations that are just really, really well run. Like you look at the Boston Celtics, for example. I'm also a Celtics fan. Um, no matter, whenever things change, we lose Kyrie, we lose Gordon Hayward, Brad Stevens steps down, Danny Ainge leaves. Someone just, it's just a well-run organization. Someone just fills in the pieces. Keith Andrews assumed, the role of manager, did a great job. They lost Mbemo, but they brought in Igor Thiago. Their analytics department is one of the best in the Premier League, which is part of this well-run organization and how they've been able to be so successful over the years. Um, but yeah, I mean, Igor Thiago stepped up, one of the highest goal scorers in the Premier League, one of the leading goal scorers in the Premier League, arguably one of the players of the season. Um, and yeah, I think they signed Jordan Henderson as well. He was pretty good for them. Had a pretty good leadership role in the squad. And overall, Brentford just definitely surprised me. Definitely over accomplished. But yeah, going on to 17th, I predicted Sunderland. This one was also pretty bad. I had predicted that Sunderland was going to be better than the rest of the recently promoted sides. I thought they were gonna stay up, so at least, you know, got that much. But ultimately, it was a pretty bad prediction. I predicted them to finish 17th. They finished fifth. I mean, they're a phenomenal team. Honestly, it's kind of shocking because when I watched them play United, especially that first game, it was like this team is very. The second game was much more tricky, but the first game I was like, how are they? Because they had won almost like every single game I think up to that point. It's like how are they doing this? How are they winning like this? Like this is. I mean, obviously I knew they spent like £100 million. They did what I think recently promoted sides should do if they want to, stay up. And I think this is going to be a model to other recently promoted sides. I just don't know if other sides will be able to spend as much, just because I know Sunderland is a very big club, historically. And so yeah, they had a remarkable season. Granit Xhaka was a great signing for them. They had Coyote. He was really good for them as well. They had, several other players that were very good for them. Um, I think Talby as well. Um, but nonetheless, I was wrong. Forgive me, Sunderland fans. I'm not going to doubt you. And I think next season they will be a force to be reckoned with as well, especially if they keep up with this ambition. 16th, I had Wolves. I knew Wolves were going to be pretty bad this season, just given the fact that they lost Aït Nouri, they lost Cunha, their two best players. Last season, they already weren't the best, But, I think Joao Gomez really stepped up this season. Even though, they ended up finishing last. They ended up finishing 20th. So, yes, I over predicted what they would do. I knew they would be bad, but I thought, they've been here before. They have some great players. And I'm surprised, like, Joao Gomez was really good, but they even signed Angel Gomez, um, from Marseille. And, that seemed to be going pretty well for them. They had Mateus Mane, as well, who's a very bright youngster, doing very well for them as well. So all very exciting things, I would say, but ultimately didn't really pan out as they would have hoped. I think they sacked their manager, and the new manager that they had brought in mid-season, I love him. Every time I tune into Wolves, he just had so much passion. Every time they scored a goal, he'd be going to the fence, getting the crowd pumped up, almost like the Madrid players do, maybe a little bit too much. But I think Wolves were always a good watch. Joao Gomez, I wouldn't be upset if Manchester United ended up signing him as the backup for the six. Great player. Andre as well, great player. Angel Gomez, great player. I'm kind of droning on and on, but you get the point. Let's see. I think I had. So West Ham. I predicted West Ham to finish 15th. West Ham did get relegated. I am glad that West Ham got relegated, though, because, again, I am a United fan, and I do want United to sign Malik Diouf. I think his delivery is amazing. I think he's robust. I think he's rapid, very athletic, kind of the profile that I would want to have at United, and overlapping left back. I think that's something that we need. A lot of our left wingers are more inside forward profiles, or players that like to cut inside. I think even JJ Gabriel, he's going to be able to do whatever, but when he comes in, which I assume he will be getting some starts next season, he also likes to play the 10. He also likes to play strike. So he likes to come inside as well. Cunha obviously likes to come inside. We're getting linked to players like Iliman Ndiaye who like to come inside, So I think the left winger needs to be one that, or the left back needs to be an overlapping one. Obviously, I think also Luke Shaw, plaudits to Luke Shaw. He was able to play every game this season. Amazing. But or start every game this season, which is amazing. I think it's the first time he's ever done this in his career, at least at Manchester United. But he is getting old. I don't know if he's going to be able to replicate that, next season. Of course, this being the only season that he's done that is an anomaly. So we're going to need someone like Diouf to come in. And then Mateus Fernandes. How can I not mention Mateus Fernandes? He is sensational. To me, he's sensational. I think he can. When I was getting super excited about João Neves before he came to PSG, and PSG is also interested in Mateus Fernandes, but we ultimately signed Ugarte, which I knew which was an awful decision, honestly, especially because we helped fund PSG signing João Neves. But I get the same feeling of like, this is just going to be a quality player. He kind of reminds me of Bruno Guimaraes, just in the way he conducts himself. He never looks like he's expending too much energy, kind of runs with his chest up, kind of with a swagger about him. His quality of pass is just terrific. He played 10 before at Southampton. Now this season he played a bit deeper, more of a 6 role, sometimes an 8. So he can play anywhere in the midfield. I think it would be perfect for Kobe. Also competition, play alongside. I think, that's a player who I really, really want, I would say. But again, I think he was their best player this season. Miraculous performances throughout. I would also say Jared Bowen had an underrated season. I think it kind of goes under the radar just because West Ham were so poor. But unfortunately for him, he missed out on the World Cup squad as a result. Likely mostly due to team performances is kind of what I understood from Tuchel. So that's a shame for him to miss out. But ultimately, West Ham are getting relegated. So that is a shame for them. But for a club like Manchester United, hopefully we can get those cut price deals. Let's see. I predicted Bournemouth to finish 14th. And, this is, I feel like, a similar situation to Brentford, like I said. Just a well-run organizations. But I will say, Andoni Iraola, great manager. If I was Liverpool, I'm snapping up on that right now. I'm signing Andoni Iraola as soon as possible. I'm already hearing AC Milan are intensifying the pressure, which is funny because, there's kind of this running joke about the Serie A is kind of just like a roulette of managers. The one club sacks their manager, the other club sacks their manager, they switch, and then it goes on and on and on. And basically, the league doesn't really progress because it's the same managers rotating from team to team to team. And so that would be great for Serie A if Iraola were able to come there. I think it would be a great change of pace. The intensity that he likes to press with, I think would be, it would really change, or it would be a strong force in the Serie A and really change things. And I think Milan need something like that. They need to really shake things up. It seems like Rafael Leao recently kind of, is implying through his social media that he's kind of over this chapter of his career. He's not really referring to the season and the team as we. He's kind of saying, Milan. So maybe that's one of the left wingers. Maybe that's the left winger that we sign if Manchester United end up signing a left winger. But I digress. It's one of those organizations that's just very well run, just very well run. I had said, they lost basically their entire backline. Zabarni went to PSG. We had Hoyson go to Real Madrid. We had, what's his name? Kirkez go to Liverpool. They lost basically their entire backline. And I feel like I said Diakite would be a good signing, and that seemed to be the case. But if I just want to talk about Bournemouth, I think they had a really good season. They just play with intensity. They press. Alex Scott was a great player for them this season. Tyler Adams, Kluivert, even though he wasn't always there, Kluivert was pretty good for them. Semenyo is one of the players of the season. In the first half of the season, amazing. Eli Kroupi Jr. What a player. I don't actually really want United to sign a left winger, and I know he can play on the wing. I really want a player like Kroupi Jr. This is a player that's going to go for £100 million, next season. Someone needs to snap up on him quick. I doubt that Bournemouth is going to want to let him go, but if the right club applies a certain amount of pressure, this guy is just ridiculous. The technique, the finishing, he can play left, right, striker, cam. He's just a sensational player. I think he's already lit the Premier League ablaze. I think most goals for a teenager. I think also highest conversion rate of his chances. Like, he just was amazing this season. But Iraola is going to be leaving, so we're going to see how that turns out, and if Bournemouth are able to, pull a Brentford and continue and just prove how well-run of an organization they are. On to the next, I predicted Fulham at 13th. This one was not too far off. I think, they actually exceeded my expectations, which is really good. I think Marco Silva, I think he is not coming back. It's unclear, I think, if he's coming back or not to Fulham. I don't think he wants to come back, but again, Fulham's one of those teams, again, really hard to play against. Play, honestly, an attractive brand of football. They have great players. They got Calvin Bassey. They got Emil Smith-Rowe. They got Alex Iwobi, Jimenez, Chukwueze, who blew me away this season. I didn't know too much about Chukwueze, honestly, before, but brilliant player, honestly. And Anthony Robinson. They have a lot of great players, and they're just hard to play against. What did I say about them? I said they haven't really made any additions in a league where every team is constantly looking to improve, and that I do rate Marco Silva, though, which is why they finished this high, and I'm expecting an even bigger season from Smith-Rowe, and their backline is very solid, and Calvin Bassey always, knowing to play against. I think Smith-Rowe did have a more, influential season this year than they did last. I think them finishing 11th is a testament to Marco Silva. You know, I said, you know, the only reason or the main reason I had them even finishing that high was because of Marco Silva, and they went and finished even higher than I anticipated. So there you have it. 12th, I predicted Crystal Palace. Yeah, I did predict Crystal Palace at 12th. I think that was a fair assumption at the time. Obviously, Oliver Glasner had done really well for them last season. They had just come off beating Man City in the FA Cup. It was a great performance. I was actually in London watching that. So that was also a great experience. But that team was very difficult to play against. And I think that's one of the main things about Oliver Glasner. I actually, when we had sacked Ruben Amorim and we, you know, Carrick was still in interim, and, you know, we were thinking who could be the full-time manager. I was really in favor of Oliver Glasner at United for a couple of reasons. Mainly because, you know, we talk about this United DNA, so on and so forth, and how 3-4-3 is not the United DNA, when, you know, in reference to Amorim. Glasner's favorite formation was a 4-4-2, very difficult to play against, but he also just was more of a, when I watch interviews of him, he seemed more of a man manager. Like, his relationships with the players are the most important thing. And I feel bad for him because the first half of the season, they were doing very, very good. You know, even despite the fact that, what did I say here? They lost Eze. I thought they were going to get Harvey Elliott, but he ended up going to Aston Villa and, you know, didn't really light the world ablaze over there. But he did end up going to Aston Villa instead. But they lost Eze. They lost their best player for another summer running. I mean, it had been Elise before, and it was Eze. Congrats to Eze, by the way, winning his first Premier League for his boyhood club. You know, it's kind of beautiful. I think Arsenal, I think God is really on their side this season. It's a little bit, you know, questionable, some of the decisions that have been made. You know, PGMOL on at least 3 occasions had essentially said that they, you know, they made mistakes. But I think when God is on your side, no one can come against you, essentially. So I think Arsenal's season and Eze's season is a testament to that. But back to Crystal Palace. It's really difficult when you keep losing your players. And I think this is why Glasner was frustrated. You know, he brings you in a trophy and you don't bring him any key notable signings. And then you basically think, like, you basically just try to run it back. You lose your best player again, and you don't really bring anyone of consequence. And you expect some sort of success. And it's unrealistic. It just can't happen. And I think that's why he got frustrated. I think that's why pretty early on in the season, I mean, he in press conferences was verbal about the fact that he was frustrated about the lack of incomings. And I think that is the main reason why from very early on he had decided that he was not going to come back. And it is a bit of a shame for Oliver Glasner because after the January window, I think everything just kind of fell apart. Yeah, I mean, they kind of just got figured out and things weren't the same. Mateta, there was the Mateta controversy where he was supposed to go to Milan, and then that kind of fell through, and then he stopped starting Mateta as much as he was before. Everything kind of just devolved, and ultimately it was kind of a bad situation for them. But that was kind of long-winded. I apologize. On to 11th. I predicted Everton to finish 11th. So Everton and Fulham essentially swapped. This prediction wasn't too far off. I thought, you know, and honestly, I was worried midway through the season because I was like, wow, like Everton's doing a lot much better than I had anticipated. They ended up doing a little bit worse. But I thought Everton were going to be really strong this season. Obviously, David Moyes is a great manager. I thought, you know, unfortunately, I think a lot of what it had to do with is Grealish getting injured. Because Grealish was having a pretty decent season. for a large part of the season. I think Ndai could have had a little bit more output. But you look at Beto, you look at Ndai. You know who did surprise me this season? What's his name? The player from who had signed from Chelsea. What's his name? Um Anyways, you guys will know who I'm talking about. He's a midfielder. A player who I never really rated. I just thought, he's kind of a workman type. Um, but he came in and he came in with the output. I was not expecting him to play that influential of a role. I didn't think he was that talented of a player, but he proved me wrong. He had an amazing season. His work rate was immense, but he also came with the output. You got James Garner, what a season from James Garner. As a United fan, it does kind of pain me to see one of our academy graduates doing so well at a different club when we're having our own issues in the midfield. And now we're looking for midfield reinforcements this summer. But I am very happy for James Garner. Obviously, he had gotten his England call-up, his first England call-up, and he bossed it when he was there. Immense player, great set pieces, great work rate, really gets stuck into a duel. Great season from him overall, I would say. Grealish as well. I did kind of Dewsbury Hall. That's what I was referring to. Dewsbury Hall. I did want to see a bit more from their signing. What's his name again? Who is the player they signed from Southampton? This is like Tyler Dibbling. Dibbling is a very talented player, and I'm sure he's still going to produce in the future. He just needs a little bit of time, I guess, but I was anticipating a bigger season from him. Just slightly disappointing, I would say. On to 10th, I predicted Brighton. Again, not too far off because Brighton ended up finishing 8th. But I wasn't a huge fan of Fabian Hertzler, and I think he is actually a good manager. Let me give him a bit of credit. He does have some innovative, tactics with, it kind of has been done before, but the inverted center back, Pep kind of spearheaded that. But, he has Van Hecke kind of able to do that. It is somewhat of an innovative tactic. He is a decent manager. I just think, Carrick made him look silly with arguably not even one of our best squads, if we're being real. No Cunha, no Casemiro, as he had already kind of had his send-off. Playing some of the youngsters in at the end, giving Malacia his farewell at the end, and we still kind of just made Brighton look like schoolboys. So, I wasn't really a huge fan of him. I was saying that, but again, they are one of those organizations who are just really well run. You kind of just, take one out, plug one in. I basically said that I didn't really know any of the players that they'd signed, but I'm sure that they'd be great. And, they were pretty good. I think losing Joao Pedro, we'll get to him, but losing Joao Pedro, I think, was big for them. That was unfortunate. But, yeah, on to the next. I predicted Nottingham Forest to finish 9th. So this was a massive overestimation, but I just had belief in Postecoglou. I felt like I'd seen him come to a club in the Premier League and change things, instill his philosophy very quickly. I thought that they were starting to have more technical players, which was, or they didn't start with Postecoglou, did they? No, I think, okay. Yeah, this is right. So I don't think they started with Postecoglou. I think they still had Nuno Espirito Santos. And I was starting to say, like, I feel like their identity is getting a little bit confused because you're bringing in players like McAtee who are more of the technical type. McAtee, I think they had brought in Douglas Luiz as well. Very technical players. And then your manager's not, it's more of a, intensity, counterattack, manager in Nuno Espirito Santos. And so I didn't really know how those things were going to reconcile, but they had previously had a really good season. They had overachieved. I thought, they were going to go on and do the same because they had brought in some pretty great players, but they kind of did fall off. I think Elliot Anderson really had his breakout season to where he is one of, as a 6, as an 8, he is one of the marquee players, I think, in the world now, especially in the Premier League for sure. But he probably will be starting at the World Cup for England, which is massive. That may leave Mainu out certain games. That may leave Rice out certain games. That may leave others out certain. But he is phenomenal. He is really an all around midfielder. I hope United can sign him. It's seeming like he's going to City, but there is a little bit of hope because City are rumored to want, they brought in Enzo Maresca. Obviously, Enzo Maresca has a really good relationship with Enzo Fernandez. Enzo Fernandez was really, frustrated when, Maresca got the sack for no good reason. And so that is going to be a costly move for City if they do go forward with it. City is City, though, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to snag both. But hopefully that makes an Elliot Anderson deal more attainable for Manchester United. But he's just an all-around midfielder. I mean, his delivery is amazing. He's good to score a goal on occasion. Um, you know, assist, winning the ball back. He's a metronome. Like he passes the ball so much. I think he leads the league in passes. He's just able to keep things ticking, help and build up. He's just sensational, but we get the point. I digress. On to 8th. I predicted Aston Villa. Villa this season did do a little bit better than I had anticipated. I kind of gotten used to the typical Emery cycle where, you know, they play really, really well for a large part of the season, and then at the end of the season, they kind of fall off, and, they're in European competitions, so they prioritize that, and then it doesn't bode well in the Premier League. I think this season in the Premier League, we saw a lot of teams underperform. So I think this definitely did help Villa in their quest, to finish in the Champions League spots. They won Europa League nonetheless, so they would have been there regardless, but they did finish 4th this season, which is 4 places higher than I had anticipated. I think Morgan Rogers was one of the standout players. I do think it's important to note they did this without Amadou Onana for large parts of the season. He was injured for large parts of the season. I think Boubacar Kamara also injured for large parts of the season. John McGinn, though, is just it's just Buendia, John McGinn. These players that you look at them and you don't necessarily expect them to be, these such prolific players, but they find a way. They score amazing goals. Their delivery is great. Of course, you have Morgan Rogers, the starlet, who's able to, he just carries the ball. He's strong. He's big. Won't be surprised if you see him get a lot of minutes at the World Cup this summer. Tuchel seems to love him a lot, and some people are even saying, he might start some games ahead of Bellingham, which to me is just absolutely shocking. I see Jude Bellingham as one of the best player, arguably the best player in the world right now. I think he's better than Mbappe, honestly. I think he's just been injured a lot this season, so, people tend to forget. But that's just a testament to how good Morgan Rogers is. Obviously, you have Ollie Watkins. I think Ezri Konsa had a strong season. Matty Cash. Victor Lindelof. He has had a pretty good season. I had always rated Victor Lindelof, let me say, especially his ball-playing ability. Back when we were in the Ollie days, when we would counterattack and we had Rashford and he'd just be running through, running in behind, Victor Lindelof would have these pinpoint passes. He's always quality on the ball. And, United fans have been crying out for Victor Lindelof to be tried in midfield. And it never happens. And Unai Emery decided, I'm going to, some of my 6s are out. Let me try Victor Lindelof in midfield. And he provided some master classes. I think in the Europa League semifinal against Nottingham Forest, I want to say, masterpiece or masterclass from Victor Lindelof. So want to give him his flowers, of course. Um, you know, there are other players that we can talk about, but plaudits to Emery. They were able to win the Europa League, so he keeps. I saw a reel. He keeps doing it with clubs that have Villa in their name, um, Villarreal, obviously, and then Villa, and then so on and so forth. So, he seems to dominate that competition. Hopefully, Villa going back into the Champions League this time can do even better than they did last time. We'll see. But very successful season for them. Newcastle. Now, Newcastle is one that I'm very surprised about. I predicted them to finish in 7th. I said, in spite of all the times they've been passed up on, they've actually had a pretty good window. It was rough for them. They were supposed to sign Sesko. He ends up going to Manchester United. They were supposed to sign, also they were supposed to sign. I kind of forget right now. How am I blanking? Anyways, there were just a lot of players that Newcastle were essentially lined up to sign that passed up on them, but they still were able to bring in Elanga, Aaron Ramsdale, because Nick Pope is injured a lot for goalkeeper, I feel like. Obviously, they brought in Voltemade, who I think Eddie Howe does deserve some criticism for this. Voltemade, they also brought in Vissa, obviously. But Voltemade was class in the beginning of the season. I was saying he looked like the best of the young strikers that had been signed in front of Sesko, in front of Ekitike, in front of, in front of all the young strikers. And then midway through the season, Eddie Howe just lost the plot. And I do watch Alice Talks Football, and one of her criticisms of Eddie Howe is that he kind of likes things done his way. If a player's brought in that he doesn't, he didn't want to bring in necessarily, then he's not going to play them. He did play Voltemade in the beginning for a while, but it was clear that he did kind of want Vissa ahead of. He did primarily want Vissa. He did primarily want a player like Sesko potentially. And then we saw at the end of the season, Osula, a player who I'd never heard of until I saw him score against my club, and I was just I was in shock. I was like, who is this guy? And then he just couldn't stop scoring. So I think Newcastle did have a bit of a resurgence towards the end of the season, but they ended up finishing 12th. I was really surprised because Eddie Howe, in my opinion, was one of the best managers in the Premier League at the time. I'd always said that I want a manager who gets their players to fight for him, like Eddie Howe does for Newcastle, or like the players in Newcastle do for Eddie Howe. But I think this season a bit of that was gone. A bit of the intensity that you're used to was gone. To be fair, Bruno Guimaraes was out for a large part of the season. I think that really did hinder them. Up to the point to where he got injured, he was ranked 2nd, I think, in the Premier League, on, average match rating, just behind Bruno Fernandes, who obviously was Premier League player of the season. And, obviously Bruno Guimaraes is a brilliant player, so that's obviously going to hurt them. But I think you still would have expected with that squad, you have Lewis Miley, you have Tonali, you have Ramsey, you have Harvey Barnes, who I think had a great season, a very underrated season, honestly. I think he didn't get as many starts as you feel like his performances would have warranted, but he was always good for a goal. I think he had a better season than Anthony Gordon, arguably. And then Anthony Gordon's going to Bayern, they're saying, which is kind of ridiculous to me. I don't really rate him as a player, but, there you have it. I think Anthony Gordon did have a disappointing season, I would say. Voltemade did kind of fall off. But then Eddie Howe started playing him as a 10. He started playing him as an 8, and it's just like, this is a striker. You got to play him to his strong suit. When he was closer to the goal, he was banging in goals. And then you take him further away from the goal. I understand, obviously, he's a very technical player. He's going to help you move the ball up the pitch. He's going to help create, but it clearly it didn't work out. And obviously, and honestly, if I was Manchester United, I'm just snapping at the opportunity to sign Voltemad. I think his value has gone down a bit because obviously he hasn't been playing as much. He's been playing out of position, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I digress. On to probably one of my worst predictions was Tottenham Hotspur to finish in 6th. Why did I think that Tottenham Hotspur would finish in 6th? Well, again, it goes back to Thomas Frank. I'd seen what he'd done at Brentford, which now that we're looking back on it, probably didn't have as much to do with him as it seemed. It's just a really well-run organization, as I have emphasized multiple times. But I thought, Thomas Frank is a great manager. He's going to be able to lift Spurs out of the abyss, and it just never happened. He clearly is not a big club manager. He's not a manager who's going to impose on other teams. He's too defensive. One of my best friends is a Tottenham fan, and he struggled to watch the games because it was just like they didn't create anything. There was nothing. It was just not fun to watch. It's just bad. But what I had said more convinced that they have goals in them than Newcastle, given their striker situation at the moment. Fortunately, also it is important to note the fact that Tottenham did go through, just tremendous amounts of injuries this season. Xavi Simons did have a pretty decent season, but towards the end of the season, obviously, I think tore his ACL. I think we had Kudus. Kudus was playing really, really well in the beginning of the season. I think he still has some records for dribbles, but even despite the amount of months that he's missed, but he did get injured as well. You had Bergvall got injured. I think Archie Gray had gotten injured. I think, Solanke, I talked about the striker situation. Solanke was injured for a large part of the season. So it's just like, obviously it's going to be tricky when you have this, number of injuries. And I think one of the reasons I had put United to finish above them, even though they kind of finished similarly in the table last season and United had lost to them in the Europa League final, was that United had no Europe. Tottenham were going to have to manage all of these games with Champions League, with a new manager who's not used to it. And they fell on their face. They were blessed, I feel like, with their Champions League draw. So they were able to get past the group stages rather easily, but then after that, ran into some trouble. I already kind of went over the injuries. I think bringing in De Zerbi was a great signing. I think the one thing about De Zerbi is he is a little bit volatile. He is prone to stir up some controversy for sure. If it's not with the players, it'll be with the board. If it's not with the board, it'll be with other managers, as he did with Tottenham's manager the last time he was there. But that's the one thing. But I will say, instantly, you could see that they were playing much better football. The build-up was just better. The players were flowing. You had Porro inverting a little bit. You had Udogie bombing on again. There's a lot of potential, and I think Tottenham will be a lot better next season because, De Zerbi, I just rate De Zerbi as a great manager, and I think, again, once the players are healthy, I think he's just trying to get his ideas across. So he wasn't trusting the young players as much, who I honestly think were some of their better players, the Bergvalls, the Archie Grays, you catch my drift. I also want to mention Randall Kolo Muani, an absolute terrorist. I don't know how he's built this career that he has. First of all, he sold my guy Mbappe in the last World Cup. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. But this guy is just a terrorist. I don't understand why he was even playing on the right. It just looks awkward on the right. He just seems like a guy who just runs. The technique is not really there. His head's down. There's no output. There's no end product. I will say one player, Matisse Tell, I love his delivery. I think he has a lot of upside, and I do want to see how he progresses in his career because he is very young, and obviously he looked like he was going to light the world ablaze when he was at Bayern. But on to the next. You know what it is. I'd predicted Manchester United to finish 5th. And I'm disappointed that I had, somewhat low faith in my club. I think people people were hating on me for that. For predicting United to finish in 5th. Which is just surprising to me because I mean, let me see what I had said. I said it may be wishful thinking. I'd said, this may be a bit of optimism, but one game a week, unlike all these other teams, is going to give us time to train for Amorim to get his ideas through. And I will say, under Amorim, even though, when Amorim was sacked, I think we were tied for 4th or 5th and only like 5 points off first. So we weren't in an awful position. I think it had to do with some of his comments in press conferences, kind of similar to the Enzo Maresca situation. Not as much to do with the performance, because the performances were doing better. XG wise, XG minus XG against, we were among the top in the league. And it was clear that we were just underperforming and that wouldn't hold out for much longer. I thought we had made great signings in Mbemo, Cunha, and Sesko that were going to, do wonders for our attack. But little did I know about... Actually, to be fair, when I had made this video, I don't think Sene Lammens had been signed. I think that was also one of the big turning points in our season because Altay Bayındır, Onana was bad. But Altay Bayındır, I don't think any club should ever let him near their club. He is atrocious. He's a terrorist. And that has nothing to do with him being, Middle Eastern. He's a terrorist. You have no confidence with him in your goal. And Lammens, I don't know if as United fans we're overrating Lammens because of, the despair of the goalkeeper situation that we'd had for the past couple of years since De Gea, and even De Gea's last season. But it's like Lammens almost broke the single season saves record this season from the Premier League in his first season, and he missed the first couple of games. So when you really think about it, he likely would have beaten the record. He prevented the most goals this season. And, I think there was only there's only one notable mistake that I remember from him. Or it was kind of a couple towards the end of the season when you saw Carrick trying to implement more of his tactics, more playing out of the back. You saw Kobe in more of a deeper role. I think you saw a couple errors with Lammens playing it out of the back. But other than that, claiming crosses, which now the Premier League has just become a brutal league when it comes to corners. Thank you, Arsenal. Thank you, Mikel Arteta. Thank you, Haram Ball. But I think when you look at the past couple of seasons, or this season, the corners had become, a major one. And honestly, United were among the best in corners this season. So but we weren't doing, we did it occasionally under Amorim, but we did not really subscribe to this Haram Ball. We're going to box the keeper in. We're not going to let him move. And then we're just going to push him into the box. And then we're going to header. We didn't really subscribe to that. So I can't really say, we did the corners the ethical way. But I digress. He claimed crosses. I don't think I saw a single corner get scored on us on Lammens. He was just amazing. He just he commands, he pushes people out of the way, he punches the ball. I think we did a good job of protecting him to some extent as well. But he's two-footed. His deliveries, I guess. Yeah, his deliveries into Sesko, into our strikers were pretty good this season, honestly. I think he's a very, very talented keeper and soon going to be a top 3 keeper in the world. Very, very soon, if not already. I would honestly say this season he was probably a top 3 keeper in the Premier League. I think you obviously have to have David Raya ahead of him, but after that, maybe Jordan Pickford comes to mind. Oh, no, Donnarumma. I think you have to have Donnarumma second. But I think you have Lammens third. But let's see. I'd said goals will be there and the defense will be solid. Goals were there. The defense became solid. I think after Amorim had left, the defense became more solid. De Ligt. De Ligt. Hopefully De Ligt comes back from his back surgery next season and is good. We were waiting for him for months, honestly, since November, I think, to come back healthy. And then ultimately there was no other choice but to get the surgery for him. So hopefully he comes back from that well. Sorry, I'm a little bit congested. Hopefully he comes back from that well, but up to that point in our season, he was arguably our player of the season, I would have to say. And I'm excited because I think next season, Maguire, I love Maguire. I think Maguire had a great season for us, and I'm glad that we brought him back for another year. I hope, he's going to be more of a rotation piece, helping our guys settle along. But next season, I think what our center back partnership has to be once De Ligt is back and fully acclimate and fully ready to get back into the swing of things is Aiden Heaven and Matthijs de Ligt. I think that's a robust partnership. Aiden Heaven brings the pace. De Ligt is not, the slowest, but he's not the quickest. So I think there's enough pace between those two. I think the aerial dominance that we'll see will be amazing. The blocks, I mean, those are just, they're in defense, they are just, classic defenders. They're willing to go anywhere to put the block in. I think we also have, some other center backs. I think Euro had kind of a disappointing season this season. How can I talk about United this season without talking about Bruno Fernandes playing deeper earlier in the season and still creating the most big chances in the league, still creating the most chances in the league, and then breaking the assist record with 21 assists. What a remarkable player. That's my captain. Where are the haters now? That's all I'm saying. Cunha, I was getting frustrated with him in the beginning of the season. I think he still had some of those Wolves isms where he was trying to do too much, trying to dribble through the whole team. And obviously, I love to see that. I love to see the tech. I want techie players. I want our players to take men on. But it's sometimes, there's an easy pass. And you have quality players around you now. You have Bruno around you. You have Mbemo around you. You have Ahmad around you. You have Sesko around you. You can pass the ball. You have Manu around. You can pass the ball. Manu. Once Carrick came, everything changed. I mean, Manu had his resurgence again. We've only lost one game under Carrick, one game when Manu has started. He booked his spot back in the England squad for the World Cup, his first ever World Cup, which is very exciting for him. I'm very happy for him because under Amorim, there was no chance that he was going to be in the World Cup squad, especially with how Tuchel, rates, what you do for your club. I think there was no chance for him, but now he's made it. He's scored against Liverpool. He's had tons of big moments. He's going to spearhead that midfield alongside Bruno, and, hopefully we sign 3 other midfielders this summer to go into next season and be dominant. But, Mbemo, I think he started the season off really, really good. After AFCON, it was very disappointing. I think in the beginning, also, obviously, he benefited. I think Amorim was smart with, people didn't want to have Bruno in the 8, but they failed to realize doing that allowed us to play Cunha, Mbemo, Sesko, and Ahmad. And I think Mbemo and Ahmad's partnership was very, very integral to both of their success, but especially Mbemo's success. After he came back from AFCON, he just was not the same. He's missing easy chances left and right, left and right, left and right. And he just became a frustrating player to watch. Even some of his technical ability, seemed to have gone away. I feel like he got frustrated with himself. He lost a little bit of his belief in himself. I think similarly to Ahmad, I think they're still both quality players, and they will show that next season. I'm certain of it. But they did start to have a little bit more disappointing seasons. But Sesko was unleashed. I think Sesko, it started when Darren Fletcher, was manager. But Sesko just became unleashed. And people wanted to talk about the strikers people brought in. Say Gyökeres had such an amazing season. Obviously, he won the Prem, but let's put things into context. Sesko's 23, I think. Gyökeres is about 27, I believe. Same number of non-penalty goals. And you have to remember, Sesko barely started. I mean, Amorim wanted to, because obviously it's a heavy shirt. Amorim wanted to protect him. So he wasn't starting him. He was starting Cunha a lot of the times in the striker early on into the season. When Fletcher and Carrick came, they did, they did the same until he just kept scoring off the, like most of these goals are off the bench. People need to think about 11 non-penalty goals off the bench in his first season, 23 years old. And then you have the hold-up play. You have his link-up play. His heading ability, his speed, able to get in behind, his finishing, either foot. I think, he's gonna be one for the future for sure. I'm just loving the signings that Ineos have made, and I know we're gonna make great ones again this season. But yeah, we did even better than I could have anticipated. On to Liverpool. I predicted them to finish 4th, which I thought, obviously I thought that was the right decision, but I thought, people are going to be upset with me. This is a little bit too low. They just came off the league and they just spent, like 400 million pounds. They brought in Isak. They brought in Wirtz. They brought in Kirkes. They brought in Frimpong. They brought in everyone who anyone would have wanted. And they finished 5th. I mean, I love to see it. I love that we finished ahead of Liverpool. It's a beautiful sight, especially coming from 15th, I believe, the season before. No one would have anticipated that, but I almost did. But anyways, Liverpool, I think Slut is just a disaster. And it was kind of a sham that they had basically, for so long, been insinuating that they're going to keep Slut. It's just like, it was clear. I mean, I said this, I believe, in the video of my predictions, was that Slut came into a Liverpool club side, that they nearly won they were on for a treble in April. This team was a dominant team. He came into that team, made very little tweaks, very little changes, and then City fell off a bit, Arsenal fell off a bit, and he was able to win the league. And then everyone's trying to act like he's some savior when it's clear the guy didn't really have much of a clue. And this season, that was exposed. The fact that they finished 5th is even a little bit too high because, again, teams fell off this season. And we're about to get into one of the teams that fell off. But this was just a really odd season. I think, again, if it were up to me, I think Iraola needs to be brought to the club. I think he has that sort of intense pressing mentality of, also just great football that club had. It's a very good fit. If I'm Liverpool, I'm trying to sign him as soon as possible. He could bring them back a little bit. And I think, obviously, they did have injury issues. Ekitike was having a great... Ekitike, what a signing. I mean, I can't lie, even though I just marveled about Sesko, Ekitike is a player that I'm like... I mean, he also was a United fan. That's a player that I was... Early in the season, I was disappointed that we hadn't brought him in, for sure. It's just the quality, the technical ability, also the hold up and link up, similar to Sesko. Finishing, he seems like a complete... He kind of reminds you of Henry. I'm sorry for him that he tore his ACL. He's not going to be able to play in the World Cup. That would have been amazing for him. I'm sure he would have set it on fire, but things happen. I think Kirkes wasn't able to bomb on as much as he would have liked before. I think Van Dijk, as I kind of predicted, I believe, in the video, has fallen off a little bit. Konate was shocking in the first half of the season. Absolutely shocking. But overall, and Salah as well, I did kind of predict Salah would have a bit of a decline, and he did, but it was also just a much different set. Losing Trent, that's gonna affect, and then Frimpong, they brought him in, but he was injured for a lot of the season. So, I do have to be fair to Slut in that there were a lot of injuries, but it's like you spend that much money, and you're coming off a league that you won, and then you have this season. It's very disappointing. And then it's just you listen to him, and he brings no sort of he's not a guy that is easy to rally behind, essentially. On to 3rd. I predicted Arsenal to finish 3rd. I am a bit of a hater, guys. I will say, but I do have to give Mikel Arteta his props, even though it's not the most attractive brand of football, even though it is Haram ball, even though he's caused this evolution, or should I say Jover has caused this evolution in the Premier League of these brutal free kick or corner kicks to where, the league is just overall less respected in terms of the European stage. He's in a Champions League final. He was in a Carabao Cup final, and he has won the Premier League. So I have to give my props to Arteta. I'd said that they dipped off a bit last season, and I think that the left wing position could have been addressed better. Martinelli and Trossard, to be fair, did have pretty good seasons this year. I still think, if I was an Arsenal fan, I would want a better player there just because I still don't find their attack threatening. I can't even lie. I made so much money off the Arsenal versus United game the second time around when Carrick was the manager. But I think I said that their signings have filled you know, some big gaps. They had another center back in Mascara. He ended up being able to also play right back. Kind of, taking from the Pep school of thought that season, where I thought was the best City I personally had watched, thoroughly. Obviously, the Centurions were amazing, but I think the treble season is the best City that I've watched thoroughly with my eyes. And obviously, they kind of ran a 4 center back system. I think, Arteta's kind of taken from that. I think I was saying, they brought in a striker in Gyökeres, and I think Gyökeres did have a decent season. It's not as great as some people want to say, but he acclimated over time, and I think, this is a decent signing for them. Still doesn't excite me necessarily as an Arsenal fan. I'd still be looking to bolster. I mean, when you win, I think this is when you got to bring in 3 more players. You got to bring in Alvarez. You got to bring in. I would be ultra aggressive in our attack. But they did bring in Madueke, which kind of helped. He did face some injury issues as well, which was hard because Saka's also faced some injury issues. But ultimately, they were able to get over the line. I think Lewis Skelly, the resurgence of Lewis Skelly towards the end of the season, playing in midfield in his rightful position was very crucial to, their success towards the end of the season. I think Zubimendi had done really well in the beginning of the season, scored a lot of crucial goals, was able to free up Declan Rice a little bit, but ultimately I think he kind of did not play as much of, did not have as much of an impact as people were anticipating. People thought he was going to be this Rodri type, and he just was not that. He just did not have that level of influence, but he did have a pretty good season. That was a pretty good signing. But yeah, I said they even signed a good backup in Kepa, and, that played out as well. This was pretty, honestly, this is not that awful when you consider the context. I had Chelsea finishing second, but you got to remember, they came off the Club World Cup where they beat PSG, and look at this PSG team. They're in the Champions League final again. We saw what they did to Bayern. We've seen what they've done to other teams throughout this run. And obviously, they're able to rest their players a little bit more, but this is one of the all-time teams for sure. This is one of the best teams I've been able to watch. And they beat the brakes off that team. They humiliated PSG in the Club World Cup. And Enrique still says that is the hardest team that they faced, even after facing Bayern, that Chelsea was the hardest team that they faced under Maresca. If they had kept Maresca, which, again, he was sacked for no good reason, this is becoming a common theme in the game today, where we have the dichotomy of player versus manager. Not player versus manager, coach versus manager. If you're coming in, you want to have control. You want to be the manager. You want to have control over signings. You want to have control. For Maresca, it seemed as though the staff was telling him, you can't play this player. Palmer came back from injury. He's there for a couple weeks training. Maresca obviously seeing him in training, saying he looks like he's good to play, but injury staff is telling him, or the medical staff is telling him, no, he's not good to play. Things like that frustrate him. There were other things that I'm not going to get into that frustrated Maresca, and he kind of lashes out in a press conference and then sacked because they don't want to give the manager control. They want to have this sustainable system where how sustainable is it when you're on your fourth rebuild now? And I think obviously bringing in Xabi Alonso is going to be good for them. But how sustainable is that really when you're sacking managers left and right, restarting projects, and now you're running into a United situation where you have players from this manager, players from that manager, and now this new manager has to come and try to make the profiles all work together. But Maresca, when he was sacked, it was a similar situation to Amram. I think they were probably fifth. Not too far off, the top spot. They had been playing decently. They'd been underperforming a little bit, but it also had some injury concerns. And Estevao, I forgot about Estevao, but he was having a great season. You had Estevao, you had Palmer. Estevao did fall injured though, ultimately, which kind of made their season a little bit more difficult. Obviously, Reece James as well, who I would say is their best player, did run into some injuries towards the latter half of the season. But in the beginning of the season, other than Hakimi, definitely the best right back in the world. He was playing in the midfield as well, bossing it. One of the best midfielders when he played there as well. João Pedro, what a player. What a player. I'm remembering I was tuning into a game and a couple minutes and I see him chest and then bike it. And I'm just like, wow, the technique. I didn't think he was going to be able to play this well as a lone striker, but he really stepped up to the role. His hold-up play, link-up play, it was great. He was getting headers in there, combining well. He's able to drift around, finishing, scoring tons of goals. He just had an amazing season, and I'm sure he's very bummed to miss out on the World Cup. It's not necessarily fair to him after the season that he's had, but happens. But it's funny, Garnacho, I do have to give him a bit of slack. He left United because, I didn't start in the Europa League final, blah, 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 even though I played most of the games, yada, 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 getting frustrated about playing time. It's like, this is why I got frustrated with Ten Hag. It's because he made Garnacho, an integral part, like he had to play every game. It became to a point where he's playing ahead of Rashford, and it was just like, where has he earned this credit from? I loved Garnacho, but it was Ten Hag kind of clearly raised his ego too high. And then he goes to Chelsea thinking, I want to play Champions League football. And now look, buddy. Now look. Predicted them to finish in second, and they finished in 10th. No Europe for them next season. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think Alonso will bring them, he will bring them up, and he's going to have time, and he's going to be good for them. But also, Delap. I'm so glad we didn't end up signing Delap. What an absolute mistake that would have been. Awful. He's just, I don't even. And Rosinha, what a joke. This guy, who did he think he was? He thought he was some sort of philosopher. Manage. When you split it up, man, age. We're aging men. It's like, bro, you're not that guy, buddy. You're not that guy. But anyways, I ended up predicting City to finish first. And yeah, they finished second. They had a pretty good season. I think, they struggled a little bit more than I would have expected. I think Rodri didn't come back as well as I would have expected. He also was in and out due to injuries. John Stones in and out due to injuries. Ruben Diaz in and out due to injuries. They dealt with a lot of injuries. I think Nico O'Reilly, have to shout him out. What an amazing season. I was on him from very early, I will say, just because, again, I'd seen, I think, in the Community Shield the season before this past season, I want to say. Yeah, the season before this last season, Community Shield, I had seen him play against Manchester United for Man City, and I was like, wow, this guy. And then I proceeded to watch some of his highlights, and I was like, this guy's going to be really good. But wow, I did not think he'd be playing fullback, but there you go. Did it with Rico Lewis, did it with Zinchenko, and does it again with O'Reilly. O'Reilly's different though because he's such a big profile. So when he's crashing the box, and you kind of see this evolution that has happened, I think partly due to Enrique being, now the overload is with the free fullback. So you have, either Nuno Mensch or Hakimi, you're seeing them pick up these positions where sometimes they're the striker. You look at, I think Pep kind of saw that, and he did his own version with Nico O'Reilly. Sometimes you're seeing him in the midfield, alternating with the left back with Aït-Nouri, because Aït-Nouri likes to get a little bit further forward. Sometimes you see him going on and bombing on into the box, getting on the end of things with headers, as you saw against Arsenal, I believe in the Carabao Cup final. He's just had so many big moments this season. He was Young Premier League Player of the Season this season, so shout out to him. And so they were struggling, in the beginning, the first half of the season, struggling by City standards. And then City do what they do, spend big in the summer. They bring in Guéhi, they bring in Semenyo, and then things changed. They switch. I feel like Pep was reinvigorated again. Sorry to see Pep go. Not really, because now I feel like it's time for Manchester United to ascend to the top again. But, am somewhat sorry to see him leave, but I felt he was reinvigorated after the new signings, even though, Semenyo not traditionally a Pep player, but he was just too prolific this season to leave him out. Obviously, he started banging in goals for City, and then he had a little bit of a dry spell, but he came back towards the end of the season. Guéhi also phenomenal. The Guéhi and Kusanov partnership seemed to be going really well as well. And so City, Haaland also went through a bit of a dry patch, I would say. I said he was going to bounce back. It's crazy because I'm pretty sure he still led the league in goals. But, his standards are ridiculous. It's funny. I said signing of the season, Florian Wirtz. More like Florian Squirts. I mean, I was looking at it. He played almost twice the amount of minutes as Patrick Dorgu, who also, by the way, is playing left wing back for the vast majority of the season and, was injured for like 3 months and still ended up on the same GA as him. I think, obviously Wirtz started playing a little bit better, but we have to be consistent. If we're going to give flack to Sancho, we're going to give flack to Antony, we're going to give flack to these sorts of players, we have to give flack to Wirtz, especially with the price tag. I mean, if Pogba had given those numbers, and he wasn't even an attacking midfielder, he was a little bit of a deeper lying midfielder. If Pogba had came in those stats after being in £100 million signing, when he's had 4 assists in one game, I think Wirtz had maybe 5, it was either 5 or 3 assists all season. Paul Pogba had 4 assists one game, and he was being told, that's what you expect from an £100 million player. So what do you expect from an £150 million player? Answer me that. But obviously, he is not signing of the season. I would have to say Lahmann's the signing of the season. I've already kind of went over that. Top goal scorer, I think it was Haaland. But let me just check. Yes, it was Haaland with 27 goals this season in 35 games. I had top assister, I had Bruno. Did get that. Little did I know he was going to break the assist record, but there we go. I did predict that. Breakout star, Cherki. I forgot about Cherki. I'm talking about City, but Cherki. This is my time. Cherki was definitely the breakout star. I think he was arguably City's best player for large parts of the season. Foden was kind of struggling. He kind of assumed that Foden role, and he became integral. He was the one to create almost everything for City, and it just became, he's just magic. He's one of those players like De Bruyne, Messi. The game just slows down when you watch them play, and it's just, they make everything look so easy. He's perfectly two-footed. He always does everything with the right foot. He doesn't always do the easiest thing. He makes the harder decisions, and he does it, and he makes it work. And he's just, he's bringing joy back to the game. So you love to see it, even though, it's against my team. I said best young player. Yoho. Yoho, I don't really want to talk about Yoho. I think he did have a very difficult season. I think, Rio Ferdinand, I watch his podcast all the time. He'll always say, when he was at West Ham, when he was at Leeds, he was making tons of mistakes, but, the eyes weren't on him. So he was able to do that. He was able to learn. He was able to develop, under little scrutiny. And then obviously he was able to reach the heights that he did because he had the talent all along. He broke the English, he broke the transfer record multiple times for a reason. He always had that talent, and so does Yoho. And I'm sure next season, and I'm sure the season after that, we're gonna start seeing it more and more and more. I think Heaven is a little bit ahead of him currently, but Heaven grew up playing in the English football system. He was in that Arsenal team with Gabriel and Saliba. He knows what it takes. Yoho, it's gonna take him a little bit more time. He's shown strong glimpses, but I think he has everything around him. He has Johnny Evans around him, Jonathan Woodgate, Harry Maguire, Matthijs de Ligt, so on and so forth. So many players that are going to be able to help him improve, and I'm sure he will bounce back. But he also dealt with some injuries. And then I said player of the season, Palmer. Player of the season was definitely Bruno. But, Palmer, injuries, so on and so forth. I know this was a long video, guys, but thanks for bearing with me. On to the next one.